Today we are here with a Necromancer build video and we have a special guest. To explain this build, we have one of the best Necromancers in our server and he will explain the build himself. With this build, he's able to deal around 6 million damage per second on the dummy with around 4k resonance. First of all, thank you for joining the video, Auroth. If you are ready, we can start talking about the build.
Yes, thank you very much. It's nice to be here. And hey guys, this build is actually optimized for the 10-second dummy run. So I'm very happy to share it with you guys. My top result is 64 million damage in 10 seconds solo. And we will also watch a video together where you can see that result. So basically, let's start with the skills. It's fairly standard. We use the command golem, of course. We use the command skeletons. We use the skeletal mage. And we use the bone wall. And if we look at the essences, and here we're going to dive a little bit deeper. We start with the helm essence. Then we're going to use coals for eyes. Because let's face it, the only reason the skeletons are alive is because we brought them back to life. So we can explode them up without feeling too bad about ourselves, I guess, which is nice. And then we have the chest piece. It's the new chest piece, Bloodless Hierophant, that makes your bone wall buff your damage. So this is very vital. It's a very strong essence. So when I tried this compared to other builds, I could see a real damage increase. So nothing really competes with it on that spot. Then we go to the shoulders. We have the Synod's Anointing, which gives us one extra skeletal mage charge. So it means that when we initiate the fight, we can summon 2 mages at the same time instead of 1 at a time, which is very, very important when we're going to do a 10-second dummy run, because then we want a lot of burst damage. Yeah, the pants, we have the Sacral Chausses, which just prolongs the bone wall duration. With, I think it's 39%. Yes, it's 39%. And this actually means that the buff itself will last for exactly 10 seconds. And since we're doing a 10-second dummy run, yeah, then we will be buffed the entire run. So yeah, it's very good to have this leg on. I have tried it. Like, you can also, if you play the Dark Curse Frenzy legs, it's also a good essence if you don't have the new chest, but this combo with the chest actually outperforms, like I just told you. So very good option.
So we can call this the new best DPS build for Necromancers, I guess.
Yes, for sure. And this is not only viable for the dummy, it's also very viable in dungeons and in raids. And if you're with a very good team in Gauntlet, it's also very viable, because then you will most often kill down each phase within 10 seconds. So yeah, this is an all-round build for PvE content, except for open world farming, of course. Yes. So let's move on to the main hand. On the first slot, I have the No Rest, No Peace, which is the new main hand. And this works very well with the helmet, because the helmet helps us, it enables us to explode the skeletons on the target. And whenever we do that, the new main hand will add a attack speed buff. And the attack speed buff is extremely strong. It's at 38% if you max out your Essence Mastery.
It's like free V2 Zurch all the time, like 4 stacks of
it. Yes. It's extremely good. Yeah, I have tried. I mean, if I go for a 1 minute dummy build, I actually use a totally different build. But for this version, for 10 seconds, it's the best I've tried so far. And the other main hand is the Poison Golem. And the reason why we have the Poison Golem is because it has quite high attack speed at base. It also adds a debuff to the target. And debuffs are extremely strong. It's a lot better to put like a 10% debuff on a target compared to adding 10% damage to yourself, because debuffs are added last. So have that in mind. Whenever you go in a group or when you go solo, at least one of you has to have a debuff equipped if you want to like do speed runs and perform really high.
Yeah, that's a great
That's my takeaway. If we look on the main hands, here's an interesting choice. I actually put Dead Keen in the first slot. The reason for this is because when it's awakened, it adds extra damage to my golem. I also noticed that some buffs, they don't stack. Like, for example, you can't have the barbarian damage buff combined with the monk damage buff at the same time. But in my testing, it seems like the Dead King buff on the golem actually works well together with the Bone Wall buff. I don't know exactly the science behind this, and I can't confirm it 100%. But when I try to switch out Dead King, my damage goes down. Some people have asked me, why don't you use the prong shield instead? And the prong shield, it actually decreases the duration for the skeletons to spawn after you explode them. And on paper, it might seem like a very good thing, but if you think about it, when we initiate the fight, we already have 4 skeletons. We explode 1 skeleton, then we have 3 skeletons, and we have the damage buff, the attack speed buff for 4 seconds. So basically, yeah, we will be.
Yeah, we don't really need extra common skeletons.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you will spawn 1 skeleton a little bit faster, but if you compare that with the damage buff you get from Dead King, yeah, you will gain more damage output from that. And also, if you're in a gauntlet, for example, if you want to play a necro buff build, if you're in a little bit weaker or like a mid gauntlet team, yes, then prong can be very good. But like I said before, in most content, and if you're with a strong, competent team, every phase will be over in 10 seconds anyway. So then it's better to go for Dead King, in my opinion. But of course, this can change from time to time depending on the group you're in at the moment. So keep that in mind.
This is the best one for you. If you have like you said, you have a weaker team or you are weaker in general, you can use the other one to buff the party even more.
Yeah, and I mean, weakness is relative. I mean,
of course,
this is viable if you're in a very strong team. And when you start to dwindle down to like strong or middle strong, yeah, then you should maybe switch to prong just to sustain this attack speed buff longer. So this is my thinking. And on the last spot, we have the new shield, which, if I pronounce it correct, is Viscerae Coffin Lid. And boy, oh boy, this shield is amazing. It's basically a skeletal mage on steroids. It uses ultimate soulfire, and it's totally bonkers. The only downside is that the mage is very squishy. So yeah, I mean, the good thing with the dummy is that it won't attack you. So then it doesn't matter how squishy anything is. But yeah, if you go into gauntlet or do challenge rifts or even dungeons, you have to be more careful about the placement of your mage. And also think about the survivability of not only the mage, but your summons in general. So either from you protecting them or from your allies protecting them. So once again, then team composition becomes more important. But for the 10-second dummy, you don't have to think about that. All we have to focus on now is to max our damage output. And that's what this build does, according to me. This is the core build with the essences and the skills.
And what about set items?
Yeah, for set items, I always play 6-piece Shepherd. And a lot of people ask me, like, why don't you play 4-piece Shepherd and 2-piece Shalbas? It's a lot better because you do more damage and you never know when the 6-piece effect goes off. And I also seen some YouTubers also recommend to play 4-piece Shepherd and 2-piece Shalbas, but I really don't agree with that, because one of the strongest things you can have in Diablo Immortal is attack speed. If I buff my own attack speed, that actually doesn't affect the summons, but this effect affects the summons. So it's very strong. So on paper, you might think that, okay, 15% increased damage is better than 12% attack speed. That's not the case. In this case, it's even 40% attack speed when it goes off. So in most cases, it triggers when you want it to trigger. If you take raids, for example, or if you take dummies, or if you take gauntlet, you initiate the fight and it will go off. So you will do a lot of damage thanks to the attack speed. So please don't do the mistake to play 4+2, because here I can with confidence say that 6-piece is a lot better in 95% of the cases. So
yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people says the other way, like you said, 4-piece Shepherd and 2-piece Shalbas. Some people even said that on my stream when I played Necromancer. But you are right. At
Yeah.
the start of the fights, you know when you are gonna crit, it's gonna crit right away, and you are gonna be able to deal your burst damage right away. So it will work.
It's a huge difference. Maybe we don't have to dive too deep into it, but the damage effects that you get from the set pieces is actually not as good as some other damage effects, because there are different damage brackets that we can explain another time. But the damage effect from Shalbaz is in the weakest bracket. So while attack speed or critical hit chance is in the top bracket. So this is what you should aim for. Now we've gone through the set pieces, we've gone through the essences and the skills, and finally we will look at the gems that I'm using.
Yep, I think they create a real difference here, right?
They create a huge difference. The funny thing is that, and this is probably good news for a lot of people, is that if you want to do a lot of damage in PvE, resonance is not the way to go. I mean, I can see people are running around with 5-star gems at rank 3 because they want to pump up the resonance. This is actually minimizing your damage. If you build correctly, you will see a lot higher damage output, and you don't have to invest too many gem fragments in the gems that you should use. So the build I'm using is it's a mid build. It's not super high resonance, but it's not super low either. So it's around 4.2k. And
these gems don't have to be at rank 10 if you don't have enough gem fragments or crests. Like, if you don't have the platinum for that, you don't have to rank up all the way up to 10.
Let's start with the gems then. On the helm spot, I have Mother's Lament. And Mother's Lament is a gem that at rank 10, it increases your critical hit chance by 32% for 6 seconds. And on top of these 6 seconds, you also add all the beneficial effect duration that you have. So you can bump it up a few more seconds as well. This effect cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. But in this instance, when we are fighting for 10 seconds, 6 seconds plus the extra seconds from beneficial effect duration is almost a whole fight. So basically, you will have 32% critical hit chance for the whole 10 seconds. And it activates whenever you deal damage. It's a 20% chance to activate. And if you're a Necromancer, you know that, you will spam attacks and do damage. So it will trigger instantly all the time. At the end of the effect, it also throws out the Bone Spike, which activates another gem, which is Pain Clasp. I will talk more about it in a bit. But this is also very vital to sustain the damage the whole 10 seconds. And I will explain why in a bit. So that's the first gem slot. And if you have it awakened, it also increases the damage of your command skeletons. That's also like a minor buff. It's not the skeletons that do the most damage on this build. They are mostly there to provide attack speed for the others.
Don't think, because the dummies is 10 seconds, don't think like it's gonna be useless in dungeons, because if you have that burst damage, you are gonna be able to kill the bosses in like 10 seconds most of the time.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about many dungeons, if we take Tomb of Fahir, for example, the first thing you do is that you run to an idol, and when you start attacking, it triggers the Mother's Lament.
Yep.
And then when you kill the idol, you start running back to the middle door because another group has killed the second idol. And by the time you reach the next boss, Mother's Lament can trigger again. And then you reach the elevator and it will trigger again. And then you reach the final boss and it will trigger again. So it's basically up almost all the time within a dungeon, in most dungeons at least. So it's very important to take into consideration also, like, okay, what is the rotation of the dungeon? Like, what is the time between different events? And then you can plan about, okay, in this dungeon, maybe I need to have freedom and devotion because I want to prolong the duration of my summons, but this is not needed in this other dungeon. So if you try to theorize a little bit more, you can actually like tweak your build just a little bit, switch out a gem here and there, and you will see that it will do wonders in the long run when you keep on grinding. So keep that in mind. if you look on the chest piece, I have Blood-Soaked Jade. I have it there because its basic gives me extra damage. It's also, I would say that it's the only 5-star gem that you should get even as a free-to-play player, because you also get movement speed, which is, once you had a Blood-Soaked Jade equipped, you can't play without it because, you don't want to be slow.
Yeah, you feel that 10% right away.
Yeah, exactly. Like I tried to play an alt character once, but it was the movement speed that killed me, and I didn't want to invest in a Blood-Soaked Jade on it, so I just stopped playing on it. But I don't think we have to dive too deep into Blood-Soaked Jade because it's a fairly easy choice to put in this build.
Yep, and it's a very known gem as well.
Let's move on to the shoulder piece. Here is one of the stars of this build, and it's Echoing Shade. Totally broken on a Necromancer. It syncs with Shepherd, it syncs with Freedom and Devotion and any summon duration. It adds extra critical hit chance when you have the Shepherd set, and it also does a lot of damage. It's a must-have for Necromancer. Period.
But in PvP, it's kind of useless, right?
Yes. In PvP, I mean, sometimes when people, they throw skills at the clone and they use their cooldowns, they waste it on a clone.
This is a really good gem for PvE, for Necromancer, but if you switch your class a lot of times, maybe you shouldn't invest in this gem because it's gonna be useless for PvP. Most of the time. Just a little warning.
There are definitely better gems in PvP than Echoing Shade, that's for sure.
But we are talking about a PvE and we are talking about a specific build, so this gem works really well with Necromancer and with this build as well.
Okay, so let's move on to the legs. Here I put in the Follower's Burden. It's also very straightforward. It adds extra damage for each summon. So it's 3% extra damage for each summon I control, up to a maximum of 18%. And this will be maxed out all the time. Let's go to the main hand. Here I put in Seeping Bile. And I only put in Seeping Bile because I need the proc for Pain Clasp. Pain Clasp adds damage. It adds a damage buff whenever the target is under the influence of a continual damage effect. But otherwise, I know that Seeping Bile is regarded as a very strong gem. In my opinion, I don't like it at all. Now we're talking about PvE. I think that in many cases it barely scratches the enemy. When an enemy has the poison effect on it and dies, it spreads to other enemies around it. But in most cases, like if you are fighting a big pack in Challenge Rift, when you kill one mob, the other mobs are already dead in most cases. Yeah, we haven't talked about, before I continue, on this build I have 6 pieces of Vex on the curse effect, which means that whenever I put out the summon, it increases the attack speed of the other summons as well, and the movement speed. And if you really want to optimize this build, you can actually have like maybe 4 different kind of curses. Not the curses itself, but the positive effect. And maybe you can like get them to trigger all 4 at the same time. But I haven't like experimented with that yet. So there are still improvements to be made actually. So yeah, but let's continue with the gems. On the first offhand, I have Pain Clasp. We talked about it already. It's a plain damage buff. So it's a fairly easy choice.
And then we have Bottled Hope, I guess.
Yes, I have Bottled Hope. It's very good with this build because whenever I explode a skeleton, it also triggers the Bottled Hope. The Bone Wall buff does not trigger Bottled Hope. So it's very good that I have another buff to trigger it with. It's extra damage, so it's an easy choice.
And some people might not know this Bottled Hope buff actually applies on your summons as well, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So in this case, whenever I explode a summon, both me and the summons get the Bottled Hope effect. In some cases, when you put a buff, it only buffs the party members. It doesn't buff any summons. So whenever you're going out to party in a dungeon, you should really okay, if you go with randoms, it doesn't matter. But if you want to speed run, then you should really think about these things. Like, okay, do I have a Necromancer in the team? Does this buff also buff the summons of the Necromancer? So when you start like looking at these details, you can scrape off 1 second here and 1 second there. And it's actually really fun to see, okay, let's go this team, what time can we get in this dungeon? And then you start theory crafting and you go faster and faster and faster. And you realize that there's many times when you do a run and you think like, okay, we can never go faster than this. And then you end up going 25 seconds faster. So there's so much you can do. And I really like that aspect of the game. So
yeah, actually, most of the people don't do that. They just run dungeons randomly and don't really think about these things. And when you're gonna start sharing your speedruns on your channel?
Yeah, well, hopefully quite soon. I have some videos recorded already, so
yeah,
that would be really fun to yes. Like maybe get a little bit of a speedrun community going.
That would be
but
nice.
I can tell you a lot of people in the Kuro clan, which is my clan, they're a bit tired of running dungeons with me because I always tell people to go change this essence or this essence because I want it to be perfect. But most of them think it's quite fun as well. So we had a good time playing together doing this. So it's fun. Okay, finally, let's go through the final gem. We have the Bloody Reach. Basically the same thing here. It gives a damage effect. The further away you stand from the target, the more damage you make. And the important thing to note here as a Necromancer is that it's the distance between yourself and the target. So if you stand far away and your summons are attacking close to the target, the summons still do more damage because you are placed further away. For a long time, I didn't play this gem because I thought that it was annoying because I like to just go in and stand close, but you get used to it. And also it's fun to like, this adds an extra element to how you have to play the game.
Yeah, so, you have to pay attention a little bit.
Yeah, and like if you want to like perform better and better, this helps you to increase your awareness about, okay, where should I place myself now, and where should I place myself in 5 seconds. And I think that this also improves your gameplay, not only in PvE but also in battlegrounds. Like positioning is always important in any kinds of fights.
For sure, especially for Necromancers. When you say a good Necromancer, resonance isn't important because they can really annoy you and they can impact the game to get the win for their team if they are doing things right.
Yeah, it's. I would say that Necromancer is probably the best class to play with low resonance in PvP, but it's not easy. I mean, if a lot of people they overextend, it means that they go too deep into behind the enemy lines and then they die. So you have to play smart. You have to always look on the minimap to see, okay, where can I find an escape route for me? And also if there are 4 or 5 people against no one, you can't just run in. You will die.
Of course.
Unless you go in with Wraith form and fear everyone and then get back. So you can do that as well, but that's for another time to discuss PvP tactics. That's basically the whole build. There might be a better build out there for 10-second dummy, but I've done some fair testing and this is the best that I come up with so far at least.
Yeah, if you have a better one, you guys can share on the comments so we can check it out.
Well, thank you a lot. For having me.
Thank you for joining the video, Auroth, once again.
Yeah, perfect.